Hey loves, welcome back to Mantho K-Drama Love Stories.
Itaewon Street, Seoul, a polite crowd gathered outside a luxury boutique hotel. The autumn air was not cold enough to explain the shiver running down Solara Hayes' spine. She stood in a simple, high-necked Maasai print tunic dress, deep indigo with rust-red geometric lines, paired with tailored black ankle boots. Her long black hair fell like a curtain past her shoulders, untouched by Korean styling trends. She was beautiful in a way Koreans often stared at but couldn't name. Her Cuban-American heritage from her father's side gave her a warmth, while her black mother's lineage gave her a regal stillness. But today, her beauty was a weapon used against her. "You see," Mrs. Kwan's voice sliced through the murmuring crowd. The older woman wore a Chanel tweed set in pink, her pearls bouncing with each theatrical gesture. "3 years of marriage to my son, and nothing. A wife who cannot produce an heir is like a flower that never blooms. Pretty to look at, but useless." Solara's fingers trembled around the handle of her overnight bag. She had just finished a 48-hour shift at Seoul National University Hospital's trauma unit. She had saved 3 lives. But standing here, in front of her husband's family and 50 onlookers who had stopped to record on their phones, she was reduced to a womb. "Mom, please," Teo started, then stopped. He stood behind his mother, hands in the pockets of his designer coat. He wouldn't look at Solara. He hadn't looked at her since the fertility specialist's report 6 months ago. Unexplained infertility. Not a death sentence. But to the Kwan family it was worse. "Don't mom me," Mrs. Kwan snapped. "You think I raised you to be a laughingstock? Your brother's wife is pregnant with her second. And you? You married this." She waved a dismissive hand at Solara's melanin, her curves, her foreignness. "A nurse. From Oklahoma. With Cuban roots and empty insides." Hae-won, the sister-in-law, circled Solara like a shark. She wore a Bottega Veneta leather midi dress in sage green, her hair in a sleek low ponytail. "I heard in America they just adopt. Or buy babies. Isn't that right, Solara? But our family has standards. Bloodlines matter. And you?" She flicked a nail against Solara's shoulder. "You don't have any." The crowd laughed. Nervous, cruel laughter. Solara's throat closed. She had faced death in the ER. She had held the hands of dying patients. She had translated medical jargon for terrified immigrant families. But this was a different kind of violence. The kind that didn't leave bruises but cracked the soul. "I didn't choose this," Solara whispered, her voice steady despite the tears burning behind her eyes. "I didn't choose to be infertile. And I didn't choose to marry into a family that measures worth by a child's heartbeat." Teo finally spoke. "Then why didn't you tell us before the wedding?" His voice was accusatory. "You hid it." Solara's head snapped toward him. "I didn't know before the wedding. We never tested. And you were the one who said we had time." She laughed bitterly. "But time ran out when your mother's friend's daughter offered a dowry and a fertile womb. Didn't it?" Gasped, because she had said it aloud. Teo had been planning to divorce her. A new wife was already selected. Mrs. Kwan stepped closer, her perfume cloying. "You will sign the divorce papers today, and you will leave Korea. Go back to your farm in Oklahoma or your mother's era's Conpoyo in Miami. We don't care. But you will not take a single one from this family." Solara felt the world tilt. The crowd had grown larger. Someone was live-streaming. She could feel the collective judgment like heat from a furnace. And then silence. Not the polite silence of a paused conversation. The heavy silence of predators sensing a greater predator. Heels clicked on cobblestone. But it wasn't heels. It was the precise, deliberate footfall of expensive leather soles. A man parted the crowd like a blade through silk. He was tall for a Korean man, 6 feet, with shoulders that strained against a charcoal gray Loro Piana cashmere overcoat. Underneath, a simple black turtleneck and trousers that fit like they were painted on. His face was sharp. High cheekbones. Yes, for him. A straight nose, a mouth that rarely smiled. His eyes were dark, depthless, and fixed entirely on Solara. Behind him, 4 men in black suits fanned out, blocking the exits. "Shin Ha-jun," someone whispered, and the crowd shifted backward. Even Mrs. Kwan's pearls seemed to retreat into her neck. The most dangerous man in Seoul's underground, though on paper he was a real estate magnate, a philanthropist, a patron of the arts. In reality, he controlled the city's silent transactions. The deals made in back rooms, the secrets traded like currency, the justice that the law was too slow to deliver. He stopped inches from Mrs. Kwan, who had gone pale. He didn't look at her. He looked at Solara. "You're bleeding," he said. His voice was low, almost soft. A voice that had given orders that ended lives. Solara blinked, looked down. A small cut on her knuckle, from when Haewon's ring had scraped her during the theatrical circling. She hadn't even noticed. "It's nothing," she said. Hajun's gaze dropped to her hand, then rose to her face. Something flickered in his eyes. Not pity. Recognition. He turned to Mrs. Kwan. "You will apologize." It wasn't a request. Mrs. Kwan's lips trembled. "This is a family matter." "You are standing on a public street," Hajun said, still quiet. "You have humiliated a woman who has done nothing but work as a nurse. A profession that saves lives, including, I believe, the life of your own mother last year during her cardiac episode. Solara Hayes stayed 3 hours past her shift to hold your mother's hand until she stabilized." The crowd murmured. They hadn't known that. Haewon sneered. "And? That doesn't give her a uterus." Hajun moved. Not violently. He simply looked at her. And Haewon's words died in her throat, because the temperature in that square dropped 20 degrees. "Leave Korea by midnight," Hajun said to Haewon, "or I will find a reason for you to leave permanently." Teo stepped forward, chest puffing. "You can't threaten my family. I have connections. I'll call the police." "Call them," Hajun said, pulling a sleek black phone from his pocket and tossing it to Teo. It clattered on the cobblestones. "Tell them Shin Hajun is frightening your mother. Use my phone. I'll wait." No one moved, because everyone knew. The police commissioner had dinner with Hajun last week. The prosecutor general's son was engaged to Hajun's cousin. The law in Seoul was a suggestion. Shin Hajun was the consequence. Teo's bravado crumbled. He looked at Solara, really looked at her for the first time in months and saw a stranger. Or maybe he saw what he'd always refused to see. A woman too strong for his weakness. "Solara, I'm sorry," he whispered. "No, you're not," she said. "You're scared. There's a difference." She picked up her overnight bag, turned to leave, and Hajun's hand caught her elbow. Gentle but firm. "Come with me," he said. "I don't know you." "You will." And because she had nowhere else to go, because the crowd was still recording, because her ex-husband was already turning away. Solara Hayes, nurse, abandoned wife, holder of a grief she'd never named, walked beside the devil. Behind them, Mrs. Kwan's screams echoed. "Do you know who that is? He's Mafia. He'll destroy us." Hajun didn't look back. He opened the door of a waiting Maybach. Black, tinted windows, license plate that read 001, and helped Solara inside. As the car pulled away, he said nothing for a long moment. Then, "You're not infertile." Solara stared at him. "Excuse me? You're not infertile," he repeated, tapping a folder on the seat beside him. "Your ex-husband's family forged the medical report. They paid the lab. You have no medical condition preventing pregnancy. Teo, however," he paused, "he has a very low sperm count, likely from a childhood illness he never disclosed." The world cracked open. Solara's hands shook. All those months of being told she was broken. All those nights crying into a pillow while Teo slept in the guest room. All the whispers at family gatherings. Incomplete. Useless. Empty. "Why are you telling me this?" she whispered. Hajun looked out the window at the Seoul skyline. The glowing towers, the neon signs, the millions of lives intersecting. "Because for 6 months, I've watched you walk into that hospital at dawn, exhausted from crying, and still smile at every patient. Because last month, when my mother had a stroke and no one else would touch her because of who I am, you held her hand and called her Halmione, and sat with her for 8 hours. Because..." He finally looked at her, and for the first time, she saw something human in his eyes. "Because no one defended you, and I know what that feels like." Solara didn't cry. She was too tired. But she reached over and placed her hand on his, the hand that had killed men, she was sure, and signed contracts worth billions and probably ended careers. Thank you, she said. Hajun turned his hand over and laced his fingers with hers. Don't thank me yet, he said. I'm not a good man, Solara, but I am a fair one. And what happened to you was not fair. The car disappeared into the night. Behind them, Mrs. Kwan was already on the phone, trying to save her family. Ahead, nothing but an uncertain road. But for the first time in years, Solara Hayes did not feel alone. The Maybach rolled through a security gate disguised as a garden wall. Inside, the property opened into a courtyard with a centuries-old ginkgo tree, its golden leaves drifting like coins onto a stone path. The house itself was a contradiction. Traditional Hanok lines but floor-to-ceiling windows, heated floors, and an art collection that included a Basquiat and a local Korean abstract expressionist. Solara stepped out, her boots crunching on gravel. She felt wildly underdressed. Her Maasai print tunic was beautiful but wrinkled from the shift, and her hair had escaped its bun. But Hajun walked beside her as if she wore a gown. You'll stay in the East Wing, he said, guiding her inside. Separate entrance. Full kitchen, private garden. My mother lives in the West Wing, but she's in Jeju for the month. You won't see me unless you want to. She stopped in the middle of the living room, which was bigger than her entire apartment, and turned to face him. Why are you doing this? And don't say because I held your mother's hand. That's not enough for this. Hajun removed his overcoat, draping it over a chair that looked like it belonged in a museum. Underneath, he was all lean muscle and controlled energy. He poured 2 glasses of water from a crystal decanter and handed her one. My mother told me about you, he said. Before the stroke, she was lucid. She said, there's a nurse, dark hair, American, she's kind. The other nurses are afraid of me because of our name, but she's not. Keep her. He sipped his water. I don't ignore my mother's requests, especially when she's right. So this is about your mother? This is about choice, he corrected. You were told you couldn't have children. That was a lie. You were told you were worthless. That was a lie. You were told your marriage was real. That was a lie. He set down his glass. I'm offering you the truth. Stay here. Take time. I'll have my lawyers handle the divorce. You'll get everything you're owed. And more. And when you're ready, my personal physician will rerun your fertility tests. No forgeries. Solara stared at him. You do all that for a nurse you barely know? Hajun's lips quirked. It wasn't a smile, more like the shadow of one. I'm a collector of rare things, Solara. You're the rarest I've seen. A woman who still has kindness after being treated like garbage. That's not nothing. That's everything. He walked toward a hallway, then paused. Oh, and Solara? Your ex-husband's family will not bother you again. I've made sure of it. Did you hurt them? He considered the question. Not physically, but their reputation, their business connections, their standing in the community. He shrugged. Those things are fragile, like pearls. He disappeared down the hall, leaving Solara alone in a house that belonged to a man who could end lives with a phone call. She should have been terrified. Instead, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Scene. 3 weeks later, Solara had not intended to stay, but the divorce was complicated. Teo was fighting it, not because he wanted her, but because Hajun's lawyers were demanding a settlement that would bankrupt the Kwan family. Mrs. Kwan had sent 17 tearful voicemails, alternating between apologies and threats. Hae-won had actually left the country, to Vietnam, according to Hajun's intelligence, and Hajun himself was not what she expected. Every morning, she woke to fresh flowers in her kitchen. Not roses, but wild Korean irises, hornblende, white lilies. Every evening, a dinner tray appeared outside her door, prepared by a chef Hajun had hired specifically because she had mentioned offhand that she missed Cuban flavors. The chef made an amazing ropa vieja over coconut rice, and Solara ate it while watching old movies on a massive screen she didn't ask for. She saw Hajun mostly in passing. He worked from a study that was off-limits. She could hear him on calls, his voice sharp and cold in a way it never was with her. Sometimes he emerged at midnight, still in his work clothes, and they would sit in the courtyard under the ginkgo tree, saying nothing, just existing together. One night, she asked, "How did you become this?" He knew what she meant. Not the wealth, the power, The reputation. My father was a fisherman, he said, staring at the moon. Hard-working, honest. He borrowed money from a loan shark to pay for my mother's medical bills. When he couldn't pay, they beat him, broke his hands. He couldn't fish anymore. Died when I was 17. Hajun's voice was flat. I went to that loan shark's office the next day. I was a kid, skinny, nothing. I offered to work for him. He laughed. So I found his only weakness, his daughter. She was sick, needed a bone marrow transplant. I matched. I told him, save your daughter, and I work for you. Or watch her die. So Lara's breath caught. He saved his daughter, Hajun continued, and I became his apprentice. By 25, I owned his business. By 30, I owned half of Gangnam. Now, he looked at her. Now I own the people who own the city. But I never forgot what happens to the powerless. That's why I couldn't watch them destroy you. So Lara reached over and took his hand. This time, she didn't let go. You're not a monster, she said. Don't romanticize me, he warned. But he didn't pull away. The new medical report came on a Tuesday. Dr. An, a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who had been Hajun's family physician for decades, sat Solara down in a sunlit office within the residence. Your hormone levels are normal, Dr. An said, pointing to a chart. Your ovarian reserve is excellent for your age. Your fallopian tubes are clear. There is no physiological reason you cannot conceive. The original report was creatively edited. So Lara had known. Hajun had told her. But hearing it from a doctor, seeing the cold, hard data, it broke something open inside her. She cried. Not sad tears. Angry ones. Then relieved ones. Then just tears. When she finally looked up, Hajun was leaning against the doorframe, watching. He didn't say, I told you so. He didn't offer platitudes. He just walked over, knelt beside her chair, and pressed a handkerchief into her hand. Now you know, he said quietly. What do you want to do next? So Lara wiped her eyes. I want to stay. Here. With you. Hajun went very still. So Lara, I'm not a husband. I'm not a father. I'm a man who has done things. He stopped, jaw clenching. I'm not safe. I'm a nurse, she said. I've sewn up gunshot wounds. I've held men as they died from stab wounds. I know exactly what kind of world you live in, and I'm choosing it anyway. She cupped his face, his sharp, beautiful, dangerous face. You defended me when no one else would. You gave me back my future. You can't just do that and expect me to walk away. Hajun closed his eyes. For a moment, he looked younger, almost vulnerable. Then he opened them, and she saw something she hadn't seen before. Fear. Not of his enemies. Of her. If you stay, he said, I will claim you. Publicly. In front of everyone who hurt you. And if you ever leave, I won't survive it. Good, Solara said. Then don't give me a reason to leave. She kissed him. Not gently. Not hesitantly. It was a kiss that said, I see every dark corner of you, and I'm not running. When they pulled apart, Hajun's composure was cracked. He rested his forehead against hers. You're going to ruin me, he whispered. Good, she said again. Maybe you need a little ruin. A private charity gala at the Shilla Hotel, but not a gala because Hajun hates galas. Instead, a cultural exhibition featuring Korean and African artisans. So Lara wears a custom gown. An Ankara print ball gown, gold and emerald geometric patterns on black, with a Maasai beaded collar as a necklace. 6 months after the square. 6 months of mornings in the garden, of late-night conversations under the ginkgo tree, of learning each other's silences. 6 months of Solara continuing her nursing shifts. Hajun had offered to let her quit, but she refused. I save lives, she said. You take them. We balance each other. Tonight was the first time they would appear in public together. The invitation list read like a who's who of Seoul's elite. Politicians, chaebol heirs, celebrities, and, of course, the Kwan family. Hajun had ensured Teo received a personal invitation. Mrs. Kwan too. He wanted them to see. So Lara stood in front of a full-length mirror in her suite, her heart pounding. The gown was unlike anything in Seoul. A ball gown silhouette made entirely of Ankara fabric, the black background making the gold and emerald patterns glow. The bodice was fitted, off the shoulder, revealing the Masai beadwork around her neck. Hundreds of tiny glass beads in cobalt, crimson, and white, hand-strung by a Masai woman in Kenya whom Hajun had flown in specially. Her long black hair was loose, falling in waves past her waist. No braids, no extensions, just her authentic, visible, unapologetic. A knock. Hajun entered, already dressed in a midnight blue velvet tuxedo jacket with black lapels, a silk bow tie, and trousers that broke perfectly over his Oxfords. He stopped when he saw her. For a long moment he didn't speak. Then, "I have ordered men to die for less beautiful sights." Solara laughed, though her voice shook. "That's the most romantic thing you've ever said. I mean it." He walked to her, adjusted the beadwork collar so it sat perfectly at her collarbone. "Tonight, everyone will know you're mine, and anyone who ever hurt you will understand the depth of their mistake." She placed a hand on his chest. "I don't need revenge. I just need them to see that I'm not broken." "You never were," he said. "But they need to see it anyway." The exhibition was held in the hotel's grand ballroom, but transformed. Instead of chandeliers, there were Maasai shields hanging on the walls. Instead of champagne towers, there were stations featuring Korean John and Cuban empanadas, Solara's request. The fusion was unexpected, jarring to some, fascinating to others. When Hajun walked in with Solara on his arm, the room stopped. Not because she was black. Sol had seen black women before, but because she was with him. Shin Hajun, who never attended public events without a business purpose. Shin Hajun, who had never been seen with a woman in 15 years of power. Shin Hajun, who was now looking at this tall, dark-haired, uniquely beautiful woman as if she were the only light in a dark room. Whispers erupted. "Who is she?" "A nurse, I heard." "Infertile. The Kwan family threw her out." "Not infertile," the Kwans lied. "Look at her dress. Is that African? It's stunning." "She's stunning." Solara kept her chin high. She had practiced this in the mirror. "I belong here. I belong with him. I am not a victim." Then she saw them. Teo stood near the bar, drink in hand, looking like a man who had swallowed glass. Beside him, Mrs. Kwan was gripping her pearls so hard her knuckles were white. Behind them, a cluster of old women in designer handboks, the same women who had whispered about Solara at family gatherings. Hajun steered her directly toward them. "Mrs. Kwan," he said, his voice carrying just enough to be heard by the nearby tables. "Thank you for coming. I wanted you to meet someone." Mrs. Kwan's smile was a grimace. "We know Solara." "No," Hajun said. "You knew the woman you tried to destroy. This is someone else." He turned to Solara, and his entire demeanor shifted, softer, warmer. "This is the woman who saved my mother's life, who works 12-hour shifts in a trauma unit and still finds energy to cook dinner for a household she never asked for, who was told she couldn't have children by liars and frauds, and will soon, I hope, prove them wrong." The room went silent. Solara's heart hammered. She hadn't known he would say that. Soon prove them wrong. Public declaration. Teoa's face crumpled. "You're pregnant." "Not yet," Solara said, meeting his eyes for the first time in 6 months. "But when I am, it will be a child born from love. Not obligation. Not family name. Love. Can you say the same about your future children, Teo?" He had no answer. His fiancée, a young, pretty woman named Sujin, had been standing nearby and now looked horrified. Earlier, Sujin had confided to a friend that she was only marrying Teo for his family's money. The friend had recorded it. Hajun had obtained the recording. It would be released tomorrow. Mrs. Kwan opened her mouth to say what no one would ever know, because Hajun raised a hand. "You will not speak," he said quietly. "You will not apologize. You will not approach Solara ever again. You will simply leave this event, return to your home, and spend the rest of your life knowing that the woman you called incomplete is more whole than you could ever imagine." He turned his back on them, and the room applauded. Not everyone, but enough. Enough that Solara felt tears prick her eyes. Not from pain, but from the sheer relief of being chosen. Later, as they stood on a balcony overlooking Seoul's lights, Hajun took her hand. "You were magnificent," he said. "You threatened his entire family in front of 400 people. I did. That's not normal. I'm not normal. He tilted her chin up. But I am yours. Completely. If you'll have me. Solara smiled. A real smile. The kind she hadn't worn since before the fertility lie. I'll have you, Shin Ha-jun. On one condition. Anything. No more threats at galas. It's tacky. He laughed. A real laugh, deep and surprised. I make no promises. She kissed him. Under the soul sky. No rain. Just stars and the distant hum of a city that would talk about this night for years. The journey to parenthood was not easy. Despite Dr. On's confirmation that Solara was fertile, months passed without pregnancy. The stress of the divorce battle, finally settled. Teo paid dearly. The adjustment to life as the partner of a powerful man, the constant media attention, it all took a toll. But Ha-jun was patient in ways Solara never expected. When she cried after another negative test, he held her. When she snapped at him for breathing too loudly, he left flowers. When she suggested maybe they weren't meant to have children, he sat her down and said, "We are meant for exactly what we fight for, and I will fight for this until my last breath." They pursued mild interventions, ovulation tracking, timed intercourse, acupuncture from a Korean medicine master who also treated Ha-jun's mother. Nothing invasive. Nothing that would make Solara feel like a science experiment. Ha-jun refused IVF because he saw how it exhausted her emotionally. "We do this naturally or not at all," he said. "You are not a project." One night, after a particularly tender evening, takeout jjajangmyeon on the floor of the living room, old episodes of Friends dubbed in Korean, Solara fell asleep on Ha-jun's chest. He carried her to bed, something he did often as if she weighed nothing, and tucked her in. 3 weeks later, she woke up nauseous. The positive pregnancy test was not dramatic. No fainting, no screaming. Solara peed on the stick, set it on the bathroom counter, brushed her teeth, and then looked. 2 lines. She sat on the edge of the tub for 10 minutes, staring. Then she walked to Ha-jun's study, the forbidden room she now had full access to, and found him signing documents. He looked up, saw her face, and went pale. "What's wrong?" She handed him the stick. He stared at it, turned it over, stared again. "You're joking." "I'm not." "Solara." "It's 2 lines, Ha-jun. That means." He stood so fast his chair tipped backward. Then he was across the room, hands cupping her face, kissing her forehead, her cheeks, her lips, her nose, like a man possessed. "We're having a baby," he whispered. "We're having a baby," she echoed. And then they were both laughing and crying and holding each other so tightly it hurt. 7 months later, Solara lay in a hospital bed. Not the one she worked in, but a private suite at a different hospital, one where no one knew her as Nurse Hayes. Her belly was enormous, round, and she was exhausted but radiant. The twins came early, 34 weeks, but healthy. A boy first, screaming his fury at the world. Then a girl, quieter, with her eyes already open. Ha-jun cut the cords with steady hands. The same hands that had signed death warrants, she knew, but right now they trembled. "A son," the nurse said, placing the boy on Solara's chest. "And a daughter." Solara looked down at the tiny faces. One with a dusting of dark hair like hers. One bald like Ha-jun as a baby. Both with his deep brown eyes and her full lips. "Names?" the doctor asked. Solara looked at Ha-jun. He was crying. Openly, unashamedly crying. Tears streaming down his face as he touched his daughter's cheek. "Ha-jun," she prompted. He swallowed. "I named myself. I built myself. But they—" He touched his son's hand. "They are gifts. From you. From whatever grace exists in this world." Solara smiled, exhausted and whole. "Then let's name them for that. Aram, meaning beautiful and good, for the boy. Nara meaning nation or kingdom, because she would inherit one, for the girl." When Mrs. Kwan heard the news, through the gossip mill, as she was no longer welcome in their lives, she reportedly smashed a vase and wept. Teoa's new wife left him 3 months later, taking half his remaining fortune. Haewon stayed in Vietnam, where she opened a failed noodle shop, but none of that mattered. What mattered was this: Solara Hayes, formerly the Barren nurse from Oklahoma, was a mother, and Shin Ha-jun, The monster who had never wanted children because he feared passing on his darkness was a father. He held his daughter in the crook of one arm and his son in the other, and he looked at Solara with an expression she had never seen before. "I didn't know," he said quietly, "that I could feel this. I didn't know my heart could hold it." Solara reached up and wiped a tear from his cheek. "Now you know." Jeju Island, 5 years later. Hajun's mother's retirement villa. A low, whitewashed house overlooking the sea. No rain. Just sun, waves, and children's laughter. The ending was not dramatic. There was no final battle, no last-minute betrayal, no burning city. Instead, there was a garden. Aram, age 5, was trying to catch a butterfly with a net he'd made from a stick and a kitchen towel. Nara, also 5 by 2 minutes, was meticulously arranging stones into a pattern that looked vaguely like a heart. Their grandmother, Hajun's mother, fully recovered from her stroke, sat in a rocking chair, knitting tiny sweaters that no one had asked for. And Solara? Solara sat on a blanket under a shade tree, wearing a simple African print wrap dress in burnt orange and navy, her long black hair now streaked with a single gray line at the temple, a gift from the twins' toddler years. She was reading a medical journal. She had recently been promoted to head nurse of the trauma unit, a position she earned entirely on merit, not because of Hajun's name. Beside her, Hajun dozed with his head in her lap. He had changed. Not completely. He was still Shin Hajun, still dangerous, still capable of freezing a room with a look. But fatherhood had softened his edges. Now, instead of spending evenings in his study, he came home early to build block towers with Aram and paint watercolors with Nara. Terrible paintings, which he hung in his office anyway. He had even, shockingly, begun a philanthropic foundation focused on reproductive health, ensuring no other woman would be lied to about her fertility the way Solara had been. "Appa!" Aram shouted, abandoning the butterfly. "Look, I caught the sun." He held up a magnifying glass, and indeed, a bright spot danced on his palm. Hajun opened one eye. "You did. Now put it back before it burns you." "Suns don't burn," Nara said gravely, not looking up from her stones. "Suns are made of fire. Fire burns. But the sun is far away." "She's 5, Solara murmured to Hajun. "She's smarter than both of us." "She gets it from you," he murmured back. His mother cackled from her rocking chair. "You two are still disgustingly in love. 5 years and 2 children later. It's unnatural." Solara laughed. "You gave us your blessing, remember? I gave you my blessing because you're the only one who could handle him." The old woman winked. "Also, you make good empanadas." Later, after the children were bathed and fed and tucked into bed, Aram demanding 3 stories, Nara falling asleep mid-sentence, Solara and Hajun walked along the beach near the villa. The sky was a gradient of orange and pink. The waves whispered. No grand speeches, no declarations, just 2 people who had found each other in the wreckage of their lives. "Do you ever regret it?" Solara asked. "Choosing me?" Hajun stopped walking. "Every day." She turned, surprised. "I regret every day that I didn't find you sooner," he said. "Every day that you suffered alone. Every day that I wasted being a man who didn't deserve you." He took her hands. "But I don't regret you. Never. Not for 1 second." Solara smiled, the same smile she'd worn on the square, the one he'd first seen. But now it was different. Now it was free. "I used to think my story was over," she said. "The infertile nurse, the abandoned wife, the woman whose body was a punchline." She shook her head. "But it wasn't over. It was just waiting for you." Hajun pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her waist. "You were never waiting for me. You were walking your own path. I just stepped onto it. And stayed. And stayed." They stood there, holding each other, as the sun dipped below the horizon. The twins would wake in the morning demanding pancakes. Hajun had a board meeting at 9. Solara had a shift at noon. But right now, in this moment, there was nothing but the 2 of them. "I love you," Solara said. "I love you more," Hajun replied. "Impossible. Prove it." She kissed him, and the waves applauded. 6 months later. A photograph. Solara in a Maasai print maxi dress, purple and ochre, holding a framed ultrasound. Hajun beside her, one hand on her belly, the other holding Aram and Nara's hands. His mother in the background, already knitting a third tiny sweater. The text beneath. The Kwan family fortune collapsed. Teo works as a clerk in a hospital where Solara is his supervisor. Mrs. Kwan volunteers at a dog shelter. Hae-won is still in Vietnam. Shin Ha-jun retired from the shadows. His legitimate businesses now fund hospitals and schools. He still wears tailored suits. He still scares people. But every night he reads bedtime stories. Solara Hayes became the youngest head nurse in Seoul's history. She also became the first woman to refuse a chaebol's offer to quit working. "I save lives," she said. "So does my husband. We're even." The twins started kindergarten. Aram wants to be a doctor. Nara wants to be a boss like Appa. Solara has never been prouder. And the baby, due in spring, will be named Heyran, meaning graceful orchid, because every story deserves a graceful end.
Hey loves, this story teaches us that never let people define your worth by what they think you lack. The right love will see your value long before the world does. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like and subscribe.